Okay, so I've spent about 12 hours figuring the ins and outs of this take on a Souls-like game. If you'd like to see some gameplay, check out the live stream. I completed the game and did a little bit of the New Game Plus. I am aware that there is DLC available for the game, but I didn't try that out. All I can tell you about is the story, or lack thereof, some mechanics, and how I was impacted by this game. In a very Souls-like fashion, the story throughout the entire game is extremely vague, let alone the beginning. Wake up as a faceless humanoid, stark white and very weak, but extremely fast, with the ability to harden, rendering itself invulnerable to a single attack. Shortly in, it finds an old dead body to inhabit, gaining the skills of the body, and some better attacks and defense for combat. With the shell in their possession, they move into a nearby shelter, meeting some very interesting characters who give some hazy instructions on where and what to do in this frightening, dark, and dangerous land.
Deep within the temples of the devout, you'll find the sacred glands of the revered.
Yeah, I mean, there are some scary monster sounds, but it's not bad. No foul language, not terribly graphic, just some minor violence to watch out for. There are some very human-like enemies that need to be struck down to move forward in the game. Besides that part, I wouldn't have an issue with my kids watching me play. Now I want to get this out right away. This is a Souls-like game, not Dark Souls. Do not get this game expecting Dark Souls, you will be sorely disappointed. There are iconic Souls mechanics, but it stops there. Safe spots that respawn all the enemies you've defeated up to that point, having to reclaim XP from the spot of death, and absurd combat difficulties. The basis of Mortal Shell is playing a being that can inhabit dead bodies and use their skills. There are a total of 4 bodies to get, or shells, each with their own HP, stamina, and skills. There are some skills that would enhance HP or stamina, but not many. So whatever shell that's being used, that's how much stamina and health it will have. That was one thing I really didn't like starting out in the game. I felt too constricted with the minimal options of fighting styles. There was no way to make a character my own with specific stats put in them. And it was the same with weapons. There are only 4 options, 3 of which are big and slow. I personally hate big weapons that do a ton of damage on a single hit. I would much rather use quick weapons for a lot of hits and dodging all over the place. So there was really only one fit for me. The shells and weapons aren't available at the very start of the game. Early on in the shelter where the shells and weapons would be placed, I could interact with them and watch a short scene that would point me in the direction that that shell or weapon is located. It was kind of a slideshow that would end where the shell is lying, or it was my current shell walking with the weapon in a specific direction. The weapons weren't hard to find though. A new weapon was at the start of every dungeon. After reading a book, I would be teleported to an arena with the tutorial boss, wielding the weapons I would get if I beat him. The shells, on the other hand, were strewn about the land, very easy to miss without proper exploration or following the instincts. There wasn't a leveling system in Mortal Shell, but there were skills that could be bought on every shell. To purchase skills, I would have to use tar and glimpses. Tar was the XP gained on every kill, while glimpses are a rare drop on some kills, as well as gained from items. Tar stays with the player's character, while glimpses stick with the shell that they were gained on. Glimpses dropped by an enemy are immediately placed on the shell being used, while I could use the items that gave glimpses on whatever shell I wanted. On death, tar would be left behind, but not glimpses. And typically, if I died on my way back to try and get that tar, it was lost forever. Weapons didn't cost tar at all to upgrade, but everything needed to upgrade a weapon had to be found. 2 items unique to the weapon that would give it a special combat ability, and 3 different items that would increase damage or help with fighting. Those were the same across all weapon types. I found almost all items needed for weapon abilities, but not quite enough items to increase the damage of all the weapons in one playthrough. It took me about 12 hours to beat the game once. After that, the game starts over in New Game Plus. Skipping the tutorial, I started out in the main area again, with all the shells and weapons coming with me into the new game, and all the upgrades accrued through the first playthrough. New Game Plus offers the same thing as the first time through, the only difference being tougher enemies. It was kind of a bummer maxing out my weapons and just tearing through my enemies to go back to slowly working my way up again. When I first started out and was burdened with the basic shell and weapon, I found combat to be difficult. After constant defeat in the first dungeon, I decided to run past everything. And turns out, that was very doable. Most enemies move so slow, I could run by all the way to the end of the dungeon. Now, I couldn't move on in the game without beating the boss, so that was necessary. And actually turned out to be some decent practice. So realistically, all I had to do was beat 4 bosses to beat the game. A few more if I wanted all the weapons. Parrying was very important in combat. After building up enough resolve, denoted by a little bar above my health bar, a parry would proc a special effect, like giving me a little bit of health or even freezing time so I can get a lot of hits off. Thankfully, the window for parrying was quite large, making it easy to get a few off if I really needed to. The most unique part about combat in Mortal Shell was the ability to harden. When hardened, I could take a single hit without taking any damage at all. There would be a small cooldown after harden was broken, so I couldn't cheese a whole fight with the mechanic. But it did make for some pretty cool fighting styles. Getting a few hits in and hardening at the perfect spot so I wouldn't take any damage, taking the enemy hit and just going right back into swinging. The game ran good for the most part. It was a little choppy in the beginning, but I'm not sure if it was because I was trying to stream at the time, or if I just had to adjust some visual settings. I did play with them a little bit and found a very interesting effect if I messed with shadow quality. So in a lot of places in the game, there's a fog surrounding the whole play area. On high and ultra, everything was fine. I could see, it was perfect. But if I lowered it a little bit more, the fog became very dense. I couldn't see through it at all. It was just a world of difference between the 2 settings. And that brings us to the final part of the review. Placing Mortal Shell on a shelf! Hey, if you like my review so far, hit that like and sub for more in the future. Now, learning how this game worked was tough. I wasn't really feeling it at the start. But, as with most games, after putting some time in and learning the mechanics, it started to grow on me and I had a lot of fun. So, I'm throwing this on the lower end of my mid-shelf. The price was good with what the game has to offer. And from what I understand, the DLC offers some more options and weapons. So if vanilla isn't quite enough, give that a try. Alright, now that we're done with that, it's time to move on to the next one. I will see you there. Bye!